Welcome to Prism Brain Mapping's video presentation, Making Better Hiring Decisions Using Behavioural Assessment, with myself, Lisa de Garston from Prism. This presentation explores some of the mysteries surrounding psychometrics, what they are, where they have come from, why personality testing is different from behavioural profiling, and how behavioural profiling works as part of the recruitment process. I would like to start, if I may, with a simple analogy. There's no better feeling than biting into a fresh apple. There's a crunch, a surge of taste, and if it's especially ripe, you'd probably get some juice dribbling down your chin. By contrast, it can be heartbreaking when you pick the wrong apple. What appears to be a shiny, delicious treat is rotten to the core. The taste sticks in your mouth and maybe puts you off eating apples for a while. In terms of recruitment, it might not be too much of a stretch to compare picking the wrong apple with making a bad hire. Not only do poor hiring decisions have a financial impact, a bad hire can quite literally act like a rotten apple inside your organisation, destroying your company and its culture from the inside. Steve Jobs described the process of hiring top talent as the most important job. Yet recruiting top talent often remains elusive, and many see recruiting and selecting the right employees as more of an art than a science. That's not surprising when you consider that as humans, we all have our own sets of experiences, expectations, habits, and beliefs. We have, whether we like it or not, what's commonly called unconscious bias. This unconscious bias can lead to subjective hiring decisions without us even realising it. In addition, a further reality is that today's job seekers are coached to answer common questions with well-prepared responses, robbing employers of that mission-critical ability to get to know the real person behind the CV. The good news, though, is that there is a secret weapon that we can use to cut through both the canned responses and the unconscious bias to help figure out if a candidate is likely to be a good fit. This secret weapon is called psychometric testing. Go on, be honest. Most of us at some time will have whiled away a happy few minutes or so on an online quiz that tells us which autumn colour we are, russet red perhaps, or reveal which type of sandwich matches your personality in, of course, 10 simple questions. We know deep down that it's all a load of nonsense, but the drive to find out something about ourselves, especially if it ends up reinforcing what we already know, is quite compelling. Why else would these themed personality quizzes remain such a staple? The answer, it seems, has a long history and an application far beyond the harmless world of popular culture. As part of a wider banner of psychometric testing, personality testing provides some much needed data when it comes to the messy human business of how people behave and interact at work, whether it's used for recruitment, personal development or team building. That urge to find out more, categorise not only ourselves but others, means that psychometric testing has become a normal part of our working life. But research shows that there are a huge number of tests out there. So how do you know which work and which don't? In answering that question, let's explore for a few minutes what psychometric tests are and where they come from. The term psychometric is coined from the Greek words for mental and measurement. From this we can deduce that psychometric tests are a method used to measure individuals' mental capabilities, and the desire by human beings to understand more about themselves goes back centuries. Our ancestors lived and died solely by the world around them, and it's therefore easy to understand why they attempted to link their understanding of themselves to the four elements: air, earth, fire and water. If, for example, the climate became too dry, their crops died, their animals died, and they probably died. Their whole life depended on these elements. As we move forward to the Greeks, we see a different perspective on psychometrics emerging. Hippocrates, often described as the father of medicine, combined naturalistic knowledge with science and philosophy to produce the first explanations of personality. The dominant theory of Hippocrates was that of the four humours: blood, black bile, yellow bile and phlegm. Galen succeeded these with his four temperaments: Their principle being that when the humours or temperaments were in balance, health prevailed. When they were out of balance or violated in some way, disease took over. The goal, therefore, was to keep the mind and body in balance by adjusting diet, exercise, and the management of the body. Although flawed in many ways, this was a radical and advanced approach for its time. Fast forward to the 18th century and we come across Carl Gustav Jung and Sigmund Freud, both hugely influential as the pioneers of modern psychology and the founders of many of the psychometric principles we take for granted today. According to Jung, the human mind has innate characteristics imprinted on it as a result of evolution from our ancestral past. For example, fear of the dark, or of snakes or spiders. However, more important than these isolated tendencies are those aspects of our unconscious that have developed into our personality. Jung called these ancestral memories and images archetypes, and his theories influence many of the assessment tools used today. The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI, developed by Isabel Myers and Catherine Briggs, was based on the theories Jung explored in his book Psychological Types. MBTI remains one of the most commonly used measures throughout the world today, and we will explore type tools versus trait tools later. So where are we now? Undoubtedly, the most recent breakthrough in our understanding of the mind, and hence psychometrics, is neuroscience. We know much more about our brains now than ever before. This short video helps explain the incredible entity that is your brain. Our discoveries around neuroscience help us rethink how psychometric tools work and in particular what and how they measure. Let's start by understanding why we are the way we are. This quote from Professor John Ratey is key to who we are and how we have developed. Most of who we are is the result of the interaction of our genes and our experiences. In some cases, the genes are more important, while in others, the environment is more crucial. For a long time, scientists believed that the majority of our behaviour was inherited, genetic, and the rest we acquired through our experiences of life. Neuroscience research now shows that the genetic figure was too high, and in fact it's probably better to regard it as a 50-50 balance. From the moment we are born, or indeed technically before we are born, we start interacting with the world. That initial interaction is very intense because the brain is developing at a phenomenal rate, initially to cope with the immediate post-birth world, but then to survive and develop to cope with a lifetime of challenges. In babies, as many as 50,000 brain cells are formed every second. From the earliest moments of our life, we experience the world through our senses, and we respond to the world through what we call behaviour. Gradually, we develop behavioural preferences, and we use those frequently to meet our needs. We also have low preferences for other behaviours, which we tend to use only when we really need to. It is important to note that even though our inherited genetic behaviour remains fairly constant, the behaviour we develop as a result of our experiences will continue to change throughout our life. This is critically important because it shows without a shadow of a doubt that we are unique. We are all unique products of both our genes, nature, and our environment, nurture. This is an important point when it comes to using psychometrics for recruitment. Psychometric tools are historically split into two theoretical camps: psychological traits versus personality types. The essential difference between trait and type theory is this. Type theory views the characteristics of people as discrete categories, whereas trait theory reviews these characteristics as a part of a larger continuum. For example, where a type theorist would claim that introverts and extroverts are two different types of people, a trait theorist would claim there is a gradient leading from introversion to extroversion, and it's possible for individuals to fall anywhere in between. Neuroscience has revealed that without a shadow of a doubt, that variation in human personality occurs along continuous dimensions. And viewing personality in this way allows for more accurate assessment by eliminating the boxes into which type theory puts people. No matter how many types you choose to look at, a type theory approach will always have some limit to the number of ways a person could be viewed. With a trait theory approach, there is an infinite number of places on a sliding scale individuals could fall. This obviously makes sense, as in reality our preferences are rarely opposites, but somewhere along a spectrum. Even Jung himself acknowledged the limitations of this kind of typing. There is no such thing as a pure extrovert or a pure introvert, he wrote. Such a man would be in a lunatic asylum. If you think about it logically, it would be absurd to think that we could categorise the whole population of the world, approximately 8 billion people, into just 4, 8, or even 16 fixed personality types. We've already established that we all love a quiz, which perhaps helps explain why type remains so popular. Finding out which Star Wars or Harry Potter character you are is fun, and of course harmless enough. Using a type tool can aid self-awareness or to help build a picture of those we work with. It's fine up to a point, but it can be a blunt instrument if used in isolation or as a basis for recruitment. So when it comes to recruitment and a good understanding of ourselves, trait is key. The second area to consider is what we measure. Up to now we've talked about psychometric tests as a cover-all for measuring personality. However, there is an important distinction between measuring personality and behaviour. Many people confuse the fact that assessing personality is very different to predicting actual behaviour. Just because your personality shows you could react in a certain way doesn't mean that this will actually happen. There is a fundamental distinction between personality and behaviour. The word personality has many common uses and many definitions, and is essentially taken to mean a mix of values, belief, and characteristics which are relatively enduring or fixed aspects of that person. Personality is taken to be what we are, while behaviour is what we do. We cannot change what we are, but we can change what we do. In business, the thing that drives performance is behaviour, how you act. It's what you do that matters, not what you are or who you are. Behaviours are the actions you take and the decisions you make. You have control over these things. You can decide what to do and when you do it. And because you have control over what you do, you can, of course, determine your performance. You've probably all heard of situational leadership, the principle developed by Ken Blanchard that effective leaders understand their followers and flex their style to get the best out of them in particular situations. This is a great example of why behaviour is key. We can't flex our personality, but we can flex our behaviour. Our behavioural tendencies influence the type of work we are best suited to and who we work best with. However, we all know people may not always behave as we expect. As human beings, we always possess the capacity to surprise one another, but broadly speaking, we settle into ways of working, communicating and relating to others that can be expected to remain constant over a period of time. And crucially, when it comes to recruitment, unlike personality, we can observe and measure behaviour, and this means behavioural profiling tools are an ideal fit. So let's look at how we can use behaviour to determine success. To perform any job well means that certain things have to be done. Jobs all need what might be termed behavioural demands, particular behaviours that are necessary to do the job effectively. Every job has its own set of behavioural demands. For instance, one job may require detailed attention to planning, another may require creativity and lateral thinking, and still another may require comforting and supporting others. Some jobs may require all of these behaviours in varying levels of intensity. Therefore, to perform a role effectively, you need to have a really clear picture of the behaviours required for the role, in order that you can measure the right things, the things that lead to performance excellence. In Prism, this picture of behaviour is called a benchmark. Benchmarks are created by one or more people who really understand the role, using a simplistic process called a benchmark planner, which converts their understanding into observable and measurable behaviours. The PRISM system transposes these behaviours into a benchmark map. Let's take a few minutes to look at the behavioural demands of a benchmark and a tour of the PRISM map. We're only going to cover the PRISM map very simply in this presentation, so this is a basic overview. The PRISM map is a metaphor for the brain, left side represented by gold and red, and right side green and blue. Each colour quadrant represents different behaviours and is split into two dimensions to differentiate behaviour preferences even further. Let's take a look at the red quadrant. Red is all about drive and getting things done, but the two red dimensions represent this quite differently. Delivering is about delivering goals with a clear structure and a recognition of using people effectively to assist. Focusing, on the other hand, is just focusing on the end result at all costs. This could be hard driving, challenging, and an assertive, if not aggressive, way of getting things done. Looking at these two behavioural dimensions is a bit like looking at Richard Branson delivering and Donald Trump focusing. Both have drive and ambition to get things done, but their behaviour is very different. So looking at the benchmark, which is shown as a green line, the closer to the outer edge of the PRISM map, the stronger the behaviour preference, and the closer to the centre, the weaker the behaviour preference. A benchmark highlights those behaviours that are critical for excellence in a role. those which would be helpful but not critical, and those that would be unhelpful or just not really required. Let's take a quick tour around this role, web developer. Starting at the gold quadrant, the benchmark shows that the role requires a high level of finishing, which is processing information and finishing to a high standard, and that would be defined as a critical factor for excellence, but a low level of evaluating data and making decisions. So we can presume that someone else has the decision-making responsibility in this company and therefore is not essential in this role. Moving on to green, high innovating, being creative. Again, a critical factor for excellence. And a midpoint initiating, the ability to initiate relationships and have impact and influence, would be useful but not critical. Blue is about stability and harmony. Supporting is about supporting individuals, while coordinating is about coordinating and supporting the team. Coordinating is more important for success in this role, but there is little or no requirement for supporting. In red, the higher delivering versus the lower focusing indicates a structured approach to getting things done, as opposed to getting things done at all costs. Therefore, delivering would be a critical factor for excellence, but focusing might be seen as unhelpful. Now, it's important to note that this web developer role may look very different if it was created by a different company, and that's absolutely fine. Each company's behavioural demands for similar roles will differ. Benchmark are unique to each company's requirements and cultural fit, and depend entirely on the unique input from those who create it. As just mentioned, another important point to consider is that of cultural fit. Your company culture is a reflection of your company's values. It shapes the way of working for your employees. In essence, it helps shape their behaviour. Hiring employees who fit well with your culture increases their chances of success and helps foster your desired culture. An incorrect fit can be hard work for you and the employee. For an example, an employee who prefers to work alone on projects won't be able to excel in a workplace that values collaboration. A candidate that requires direction and guidance may not suit a fast-paced startup where employees are expected to take more initiative. A leader who emphasises command and control might have issues in a democratic environment where all employees get a say. The most successful hires need to fit both the job and the workplace culture. Using generic norms or norm groups to establish a fit is only considering one aspect of a candidate's behaviour and may ignore the cultural fit, so unique to that organisation. An accountant for PricewaterhouseCoopers may look very different in terms of behaviour and cultural fit to an accountant of a small high street firm. This is why prism benchmarks are unique for the role in that company. Once you've created your benchmark, the next step is for the job applicants to complete the online prism questionnaire. This captures their behavioural preferences, which are then compared to the benchmark map. The system compares the two lines, and this pictorial overview plus other reports provide insights for the recruitment process. Although benchmarking can be an integral part of your recruitment process, it does not make judgments on an applicant's qualifications, skills, or experience in the role advertised. PRISM measures suitability, not eligibility. Benchmarks can also help avoid unconscious bias, as PRISM highlights a candidate's real behavioural preferences, not the recruiter's perception of them. Information from the benchmark can also be used to create an advert for a role, using the preference descriptions for behaviours that are critical for excellence. By using these, you're going to attract people who identify with those descriptors. For an example, if a role has a high preference for behaviours in the red quadrant, then don't be afraid to use words such as challenging, driven and assertive, as they will resonate with those who have strong preferences for those behaviours. Let's see how benchmarking works in practice. This is the benchmark for the web developer that we looked at earlier. So a quick recap. Strong attention to detail, creativity and a structured drive to get things done. And then we add the candidate's behavioural map, shown in red over the benchmark in green. you can immediately see it's not a great fit. Looking at the gold quadrant, the benchmark for this role requires a high attention to detail, finishing, which the candidate has. However, the other gold dimension, evaluating, is also very high for the candidate. But the job benchmark indicates high evaluating is not required or important in this role. Therefore, this could lead to a huge sense of frustration in the candidate as they're not able to exercise the behaviour in this role. In the green quadrant, the role requires a high level of creativity and innovation. The candidate has a very low preference for this and would therefore struggle to meet the demand for being highly creative and innovative. It is highly likely they would be unable to deliver to the high standard required, and this could lead to increased stress on the candidate as creative and innovative behaviour is outside of their natural comfort zone. Initiating is a good match, but it's not deemed to be a critical factor for excellence in this role. In the blue quadrant, the candidate's blue behaviours, supporting and coordinating, are higher than the benchmark, with supporting in particular being a cause for concern, as the candidate has a much higher preference for supporting individuals. But supporting is not one of the critical for excellent factors in the role, which once again could lead to frustration or detract the candidate from what is actually required in the role. However, coordinating would be seen as a reasonable match, as the candidate would have no problem fulfilling the demands of the role, and the gap between benchmark and candidate is not large. In the red quadrant, delivering is critical for excellence in the role, and the candidate is a good match. And again, for focusing, the candidate is a good match, as this behavioural preference is not seen as being critical. So, having looked carefully at the behavioural demands of the job versus the candidate's behavioural preferences, we would surmise that this candidate may not be the best candidate for the role due to the huge mismatch in innovating and evaluating. Having explored how we recruit the right people, let's consider other advantages to using Prism once a successful candidate is hired. During their induction, they can be provided with feedback on their Prism map to raise awareness of their behavioural strengths and blind spots, which could really help them hit the ground running. Prism can also be used throughout your company, whether that is for coaching, creating PDPs, enabling teams to assess their effectiveness in key result areas, for employees to understand the team they work in, for giving employees preparation and ongoing leadership skills support. Prism also offers a 360 feedback facility where you can also input your own company's competencies. So, to summarise what we've covered today, psychometric tests can help remove unconscious bias and see through canned responses. Not all psychometric tests are relevant for recruitment. Trait, not type, is key. In business, the major determinant of performance is behaviour. Prism is a neuroscience-based trait tool which measures behaviour, so is an ideal fit for recruitment. So, this brings us to the end of our video presentation on using behavioural assessments as part of your recruitment process. If you're keen to understand more about Prism and its many business applications, then please go to our website, prismbrainmapping.com, or email me on info@prismbrainmapping.com with any questions you may have on Prism, its applications, or indeed becoming accredited as a practitioner. If you are interested in becoming an accredited Prism practitioner, then please go to prismbrainmapping/thinkific.com for more information on our online accreditation course. Our online accreditation course allows you to work at your own pace and in your own preferred environment. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.